Looking at Job will be the beginning of our wisdom literature category. But a fascinating detail is that much of the passages we looked at were moments in which mankind was approached by a serpentine figure, spiritual, political, or physical. I think we saw in most cases they were often a political, physical reality, like a king or a figure that's being spoken, like another human talking to them. Whereas we have the serpent, who is a spiritual and a physical. In some of these narratives, the seed of the woman passes the test and avoids the dragging into the sade. So they avoid being dragged into the sade, into the tahom, so out into the field, out into the chaos water, out into the place of non-order, disorder, non-creation. In some of the narratives, the human crushes the seed of the serpent. However, every human figure, whether we see it or not, at some point are overcome by the dragon or even become agents of the dragon. The wisdom literature is not the only place that discusses this, but is a key place that focuses primarily on God's battle with the dragon on our behalf, with some exception, as we will see in Job. Chaos is not an opposing force to God, it is not equal, but it is anti-creation, and that is how it seeks to oppose God by dragging his creation back into a state of tohu vavohu, which is our very early language of the pre-creative order. So I'm just gonna give a brief reminder of what happened in Job 1 and 2. So when we go to Job 3, we can have some fun. All right, so in Job 1, we have the first verse, which describes the fact that there is Job, where he lives, that he's blameless and he's upright, so he's in a right relationship with the Lord. He's not one who is really actively seeking to disobey him. Doesn't mean he's perfect. It just means that he is, it's kind of like David. He's a man after God's own heart. He's right with the Lord. He's doing well. He fears God, turns away from evil when he can, and mentions that he has these sons and daughters, all this prosperity that God has given him with animals and land. And we just kind of get a nice little blurb for about 5 verses about Job. Life is great. Life is awesome. Verse 6 appears, and it states that now there was a day when the sons of God, this would be the divine council here, so there was a day when the divine council came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan also came. There's a "the" there in Hebrew, and you don't put in Hebrew a definite article before a name. You put it before a title. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily take away who this could be, but if we're going to translate it, it should be "and the Satan," or the adversary, or the questioner, also came among them. Yahweh said to the adversary, the Satan, the questioner, "From where have you come?" And this figure answers the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth." And this is the whole conversation we go about where they're back and forth. And he says, God's like, "Have you seen my servant Job and how awesome he is? He turns away from evil. He fears me. He knows who I am, and he knows me intimately. He's having this right relationship with me." And then this figure goes, "Yeah, but does he do that because you've provided all this stuff for him, or because he actually loves you? Does he do all this because he actually wants this relationship with you, or is it really more of the fact that you've just given him all this stuff, and he's like, cool, God does this for me, therefore I'll just do whatever I can to keep it?" Like this figure's questioning the motive of Job. He's also questioning the motive of God's desiring to bless people and how blessing works. Is this the best system for blessing? Are you blessing them just simply so they would stay with you? What if that's really Job's intent here? Now, God knows the heart of mankind, so he knows what Job's true intentions are. The other figures don't know that. But this is being done from the entire divine council, and so God takes him up on a challenge, saying, okay, do what you want to him, don't kill him, do what you want, and we'll see what happens. Of course, God knows what's going to happen, he's God, but he allows this to happen. This is a passage that I think does not get considered enough in the question of the problem of evil. When we talk about the question of, is there free will? Is it all just determined by God? Is it determinism? Is it, what is the problem of evil? Is it just this? Is it just that? And sometimes we kind of focus on, it is God and humans. We forget there's another whole category of beings that also play into it. And this would be a passage to really consider, like, sometimes it seems like things happen not because of something that sinful that someone did, it's not because of God's anger. Basically, the whole point is that there's a whole other category that we don't consider and just kind of bursts all of our frameworks. So there's a lot more that's going on that we just do not know. And Job really points to the fact that sometimes things happen not because of sin and not because of God's anger. That's a very important thing. We kind of just act like there's only those two options. Sometimes things just happen, whether that be something spiritual is involved or things spiritually aren't involved. Sometimes things happen. It is not always about sin. It is not always about judgment. We have that in chapter 1. We know a lot of stuff happens to Job. Then we have another engagement between this accuser and God, and then we have another series of stuff that happens. Then Job sits for a while in silence with his friends because, holy smokes, a lot just happened to him. It takes him days before he speaks. So Job opened his mouth for the first time in days at verse 1. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said a man is conceived, let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light, but have none, nor see the eyelids of the morning, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes. That's a heavy paragraph. This is the opening of his lament, opening of his speeches with his friends. Think of this almost like as Job is talking about his life as a microcosmos. If we think about that, the language plays into a little bit more. Darkness, not letting light shine. That's a pre-creative state, darkness over light. Let me be completely decreated. Let me not even just die. Let me just not exist. Let me my entire being be erased from existence. I was never created to begin with. Let my entire conception never be. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. So that very domain that we said was not tov, it was ra. Let that entire rawness just completely consume me and consume what my entire existence is. Clouds dwell upon it. Let the blacks of day terrify it at night. Then he goes down, let those who curse it curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. So this is where we get our chaos monster, Leviathan. We're talking about the dragon itself. Let it be aroused so that way it can completely consume me and wipe me out. Remove my day. His desire is for it to be completely gone. He does not remind God of the time at creation when God defeated the chaos dragon. Job does not ask for Leviathan to be killed afresh. The bitterness of the darker Psalms is present, but without the hope that God might be cajoled into action to conquer chaos again. Instead, the opening action suggests that enchanters should wipe his day of birth out of history using language that has undertones of undoing creation. Ancient Egyptians imagined that giant serpents, such as Apep, would try to swallow the sun, which is Ra. Each night, as it traveled through the underworld on a ship, and their priests had extensive magic rituals that would help to repel that chaos so that the normal order of sunrise could not continue each day. Job here poetically calls on these religious specialists to reverse their normal procedure and help chaos win. But of course, if Leviathan is aroused, the fleeing serpent will do far more than just swallow up Job's day. All light and life will be endangered. Orland is seen as like, Job's asking for something that he doesn't really understand what he's asking for. Job's asking for people like these Egyptian figures to arouse Leviathan, to call upon the dragon, the serpent, the chaos monster to consume him. But just chaos monsters don't stop with one person. They go after everything. So Orland's pointing out that Job is very quick to throw this out there. This idea, especially when you know Egyptian and Babylonian thought on chaos. This is a very, very big statement for him to make, not even just on the heaviness of erase me entirely. He's like, you ask for the chaos monster to come. It's not just going to kill you, it's going to kill everyone. It's going to come after everyone in its way. It doesn't care about just you. You're not his focus. You're just another meal or a little snack for him. Which then goes into here where I just mentioned with Angel, where he states that Job is asking that not for the chaos monster to be destroyed. He's asking that the chaos monster would just destroy him. Just get rid of me. So it's the very reverse of God, I don't want you to step in, basically. I kind of want everything that you've done to be undone. Get rid of it. I don't want it. Very bold statement to just be thrown out there on his opening paragraph after everything that happened. It's no wonder why his friends, still wrong, just kind of jump in to God's defense, because he makes a very big claim in this opening sentences. It's not the only thing he says, they call him the question, but that's a lot to be asking for, especially if you're carelessly throwing it out there. There's that layer of do you really know what you're asking for when you're saying you want this? Do you really know? And God sometimes lets us just kind of say those things because he knows we're grieving, and it is part of our developing and being wise and being stronger people. Let's go to Job 7. So this is something that he basically is like what he would say to God. He's calling the questions like, what have I done? What did I do to you? If I sinned, what did I do? I don't know what I did to you to make you do this to me. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or a sea monster? I think it's interesting. He asked the question, am I the sea first? And then he also asks, am I a sea monster? If we remember way back to our very, very first session with Marduk and Baal, where they go to fight the dragon in their creation epics, they engage, sometimes the language is kind of blurred and weird, where we know that in Babylon or Canaanite mythology that Yam was also the name of a god, was also the word for sea within Semitic language. So the storm god is fighting the dragon and is trampling over the sea. So the question is he fighting the sea, as in Yam 2, is he fighting two figures, or is he fighting one? Either way, he's trampling over the sea, and Job's like, am I the sea that you trample on? Am I the dragon that you have to kill? The question is, am I your enemy? And if so, what did I do to become your enemy? Why have I become the one that you have to fight, the one that you have to destroy? So now he's taking the chaos language, the chaos monster, the creation epic, of which we know Genesis 1 kind of does away with a little bit. It kind of like says like, oh, you think God had to fight something because it's equal to him. No. Until you get to Psalm 74 where it's like, God fought something to create everything. But Job's here like, what did I do to become the very thing that you have to fight? Why am I your enemy? Why am I the one you're seeking to destroy? Why are you trying to pierce me? How did I become Leviathan? Why am I Leviathan? Am I Leviathan? Why are you putting me in bounds? Job 9, 12 through 14, I highlighted. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? God will not turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahav. We mentioned Rahav earlier, where it calls Egypt a dragon and Rahav. And I think I mentioned then that Rahav is used nowhere else except the Bible. And it seems to be probably, and by the case of all the times that it tends to, way it ties to other words, it's a name of a sea dragon, probably another name for Leviathan, if not just another name for a sea dragon in general, of which is usually tied to Egypt. However, in this case, we're not talking about Egypt. Egypt has no role in what's going on here. And so God will turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahav. Last time we heard about the helpers of Rahav were the people that could summon Leviathan. If we're talking about them being the same thing, the last time we saw that was the people that Job said, oh, guys, cast your spell to call forth the dragon to swallow me up from being conceived and wipe everything out. And now it's in the context of, in the presence of God's anger, they cower and hide at the same time. So we're kind of getting into this where he's like, who can really question him? And he's still mad at God. He's still frustrated, confused. But he's also like, the people who could do this, or the thing that could do this, even it submits to God. So what am I to do with this? What am I supposed to do here? Chapter 26. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he stilled the sea, or the Yam. By his understanding, he shattered Rahav. By his wind, the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. This is heavily referencing the epic of Gilgamesh, the epic of Baal, and all those things where they pierce Leviathan or Lotan, or the other variety of words they use to describe it, like Tiamat, and how it's the fleeing serpent is running away. Job struggles with the question of why God would allow him to suffer, while still recognizing God's majesty and power, providing a description of the creation narrative, which in most cases would be known as the chaos conf. And there are parallels back to Genesis 1 here. He stilled the sea, so there's a whole idea of like the waters are calm now. If you look at verse 2, where it describes the chaos water, but then God's presence is just water. But then also it moves where he says to move it. Here's the funness. By his ruach, which is also the word described to be of the presence of God, where it says, and the Spirit of God was hovering. The Ruach of God is over the waters. This is also the word used of the thing that moves the sea of reeds with the Egyptians, God's Ruach, because they had this really interesting mixture of spirit and wind and breath all tied together in some fun, weird ways. In short, it's really kind of beautiful where they tied wind, in some cases, not all cases, almost to like the presence of God, and that is the Spirit of God passing by and through things. in some cases, not every case. But we have that, so that's kind of calling there because he uses his ruach to bring things into being and to put things where they're supposed to be. And then his hand pierced the fleeing serpent, of which in this case would be calling onto the other creation epics where they had to pierce something. It's like, yeah, he's the one who did it. The other gods, they're not the one who fought the chaos monster. He's the one who fought the chaos monster, and he won. So God calms the seas. He destroys the forces of chaos. He is creator. He has pierced the fleeing serpent. No being is comparable to him. No being can do what he can do. They, and really we especially as well, all pale in comparison to him. Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind. Pause. That is major language pulling from, 1, Exodus, and 2, from other creation epics, where it's the storm god in a whirlwind that shows up. And God is showing up in the context of previous Leviathan stuff in a whirlwind. The storm god has come. So now he's here. And then we get the also wonderful statement, dress for action like a man, I will question you and make it known to me. Now, scholars have pointed out that this is not necessarily God, from here on out, is not directly just God saying, I'm going to ask you this really rhetorical question that makes you look like a fool. Some will say that, yes, God is showing a level of frustration towards Job, I guess you can say in some case. But he's also calling Job into actual thinking over the things that he has been saying and who God actually is. And this is actually, in some way, 1, God is calling him out saying, all right, time to be a man and let's consider your words. But he's not just coming over to beat him over the head with things that Job would already know. He's coming to invite Job into thinking about the very things he says and now to reflect on who God actually is. This is on one hand, it's stern, but it's also like a dad coming in and be like, I'm going to tell you what's what. But it's not just so I can show you up. It's so that way you come to realize what's actually happening here. Or realize the actual things that you're saying. Because the first section, this is important, this is the second speech of God. The first speech is him going on about his creation. Job has been found questioning God's care for creation, specifically him, saying, I know he loves man, he does this. I know all these things about human. He doesn't do that for me. Apparently. He's completely just forgotten about me, has gone past me. And then God's whole first speech is like, I created everything. I know where everything is. I know where the donkey lies down and what he eats. What do you mean I've forgotten you? I know you so much more intimately. It doesn't tell him why things happen, but if you think about what he's doing and before, he's like, I know you could handle this. He doesn't say that directly, but that's the imply with the first chapter. It's like, I know what you're capable of. I know what you can handle. And for the adversary, whether it be the devil or a person of the board, I guess you could say, it's showing he may be mad at me. He didn't leave. So the very thing you called the question, he's still here. But now we get to the second speech. So he just spent the whole speech and Job's like, you're right. I'm sorry. I give up. And then he has a speech like, I said what I said. Shouldn't have. Shoot, so sorry that you heard me. Things should be done. And then God calls for a second speech, where we get 2 wonderful creatures that, so mistreated in this text. So, let's start with the word itself. Behemoth. Behemoth is not a name of any species, but rather as Eric Ortland puts it, the anglicization of the feminine plural of the Hebrew word behemah, which refers either to animals in general or livestock in particular. The name does not seem to point to any one species of animal. So first off, by mere name, it is not a specific creature. It's just creature, and then we get all these descriptions. So it's like the super beast. It's effectively what it is. It's like a super creature. It's like a creature that's beyond everything else. Also, this creature is made along with Job, which further separates this creature from that of any other animal. If we do take Genesis 1 and 2, the animals are made separate from human, which means if this one is made with Adam, it is already separate than all the other ones. It is not in the same category as the livestock made before Adam or the livestock are made after Adam. It says that it was made with him. So clearly this is not talking about any of those categories. We're not there. Behemoth has an emphasis on its status more so than its own name, as we see that it is described as like the greatest of all of the creatures. King of all creatures, which we tend to think of like the lion. This is the lion's lion. This is the king of all the creatures. If we look at the word first, can refer either to temporal priority or the most important part of something. So if we take it as he was made first, you could take it as he is the very first thing that came out, or he is of the highest importance in God's creation. So on the one hand, the reference to Behemoth's creation in verse 15 may point to his being the first animal, however, does not square with creation of Genesis 1-2, if you want to put that in there. And if Behemoth represents supernatural chaos, no mention of it is made in the Old Testament creation accounts of God's creating chaos. The distance between the reference to Behemoth's creation in verse 15 and verse 19 together with the next verse's portrayal of Behemoth's superiority to every other animal suggests that Behemoth is first in God's way in terms of importance. So we're talking about priority, more likely, but even if we want to take it as placement, it completely throws out those other categories. Those categories don't fit. We also have most of the ancient world believed that chaos creatures were outside of the established order and often viewed them as a threat to the order. In contrast, the Hebrew Bible consistently expresses God's control of chaos creatures and merges them into the ordered cosmos. Let's remember the context of the second speech. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be in the right? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder a voice like this? Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity, clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone who is proud and abase him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together, bind their faces in the world below. Then will I also acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you. We're talking about God's judgment here. To then just shoehorn ideas like, oh, this is about creatures in general, makes no sense. We're talking about God's ability to produce judgment and to judge rightly. Why then would he go on a side tangent about dinosaurs or hippos? It makes no sense within the context. Honestly, kind of spits in the face of the first 14 verses, because if it was really about that, it would belong in the first speech. It has no place here in the second speech. Walton here, although creation entailed bringing order to the cosmos is not a totally ordered system. The fact that there is a Garden of Eden where a high-level order exists, but also space outside the garden where order has yet to be established, evidences the distinction. Hence the delegation of going out to rule and establish in Genesis 1, going out and ruling over things, to make all creation like the garden spot, like the throne room, to share an expanding rule over creation. Part of the task of humanity is to go out and cultivate things, to share and bring things into order. God already established order, but it's for us to go out and do that very same thing. He's delegating that role to human beings in Genesis 1. That's the whole point of the ruling and the subduing. So as Ortlund states, collectively, these aspects of Behemoth's description suggest a creature of immense strength, but entirely under the rule of God, a beast no less a creation than Job, but not fitting into the normal categories the Old Testament uses to describe animals. Behemoth has a rank of first place in God's plans for this world, but God is also going to destroy him. If the first 13 verses is all talking about God's judgment. So the whole idea this is just describing super cool animals makes no sense. God just went on a side tangent like, oh, I forgot to mention these in my last speech. Wait, he doesn't forget things. It's all part of his discussion with Job's like, okay, I told you I see all things. I'm going to address the fact that you also just questioned whether or not I'm actually in control and I'm able to handle the chaos. And also going to address the fact that you asked for chaos to come destroy you. You asked for the dragon. And now he goes on about that, and then we get these two descriptions of Behemoth and Leviathan. Leviathan, I think we've kind of established earlier that is a chaos creature. And Leviathan piggybacks off of the same speech as Behemoth. This is all part of him. I mean, let's kind of read through this again. Behold Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins. So this beast has power. Muscle in his belly. He makes his tail. Some kind of point that there's a euphemism here that could refer to something else of a male specific, like a cedar. That sinews of his thighs are knit together. So this thing is powerful and strong. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. Now we're getting metaphorical even further. He is the first of the works of God. We just kind of went on how that refers more to priority, probably than actual placement, as many have argued. Let him who made him bring near his sword. So come fight him if you want. Not going to work. You can't fight him. For the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. And the mountains are the places of divine. Mountains are like, you don't just go to a mountain, you go up there to a divine place. A large number of your high places contain temples, because that's where you go to convene with the gods. So, and also, it shows importance. So he's up there, while all the other beasts just play. So he's on land. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. So now we're getting some little water language as well. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, the river is turbulent. He is not frightened. We've mentioned rivers and waters before as the domain of chaos. He's not frightened by this. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Can you conquer Behemoth? No, you can't fight Behemoth. And you're questioning my ability to judge things, to keep things in order. You're questioning my ability to keep things in order and not be in chaos. It doesn't really fit, one, with the first 13 verses. Two, its name just doesn't name a specific creature. And three, is combining all these creatures into him and saying that he's the most powerful of them all. I see why people say dinosaur, but that completely misses the point. And it completely misses the first 14 verses. Because again, we just went over in the first speech about God's power and his sight and his knowledge. Why in the context of God going over his ability to judge and his right arm, which is a term of judgment, do we then just go randomly into a dinosaur passage? It doesn't make sense. And so if it doesn't make sense, we shouldn't force it. This creature's brought up in question, or in part, of responding to Job's questioning of God's ability to do justice. Hey, I can beat a dinosaur. It doesn't really show justice. That kind of ties back to the first passage about his power. What we're talking about is justice. We're talking about his ability to judge. This would fit better in the chaos monster, or the cosmic monster thing, because what human being can fight chaos? No human being can fight chaos. Very last question, he says, human, come with a sword if you think you could take him. Can you take him by his eye or pierce his nose with a snare? That's important to hold on to. Why? Very next verse. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook or press down his tongue with a cord? We've already tied back to Behemoth, where it's like, can you pierce his nose, which would involve getting him? All right, can you do the same Leviathan? Can you pierce him? Can you draw out him with a fishhook? Or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? Or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Traders bargain over him. Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? So now he's taking Leviathan and saying, can't do this. Who are you to stand before me and question my ability to provide justice? You can't take on chaos. I can. Who is first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. I will not keep silence concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who could come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezing flashed forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. His heart is hard as a stone. Now we're talking about the heart of someone. You only describe the heart of someone when it's talking about an agent that can make choices, moral choices. His heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid at the crashing there beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as a straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. That's to home, the chaos water. He makes the sea like a point of ointment. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. So one would think the chaos water to be old. On earth there is not his like a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. What dinosaur is king over prideful people? And this is continuing the Behemoth conversation. So we have these two creatures in relation to God's justice. And the second one, so heavily one talk about with mythical language, and also talks about having a hard heart and is king over the prideful. We're not talking about regular creatures here. We're talking about something beyond human ability and control. Human beings cannot judge things the way God can. Human beings cannot handle chaos the way God can. Human beings can't handle spiritual forces the way God can. Nothing is comparable to his ability, and this is regarding his judgment. So let's just kind of review some things here. Verse 1 and 2, Job cannot subdue this thing, cannot take down or capture Leviathan by any human means. 3 to 4, Leviathan does not need to beg or strike to deal to avoid capture from Job. Verse 5, Leviathan has no entertaining benefit. 6, no economic advantage. 7, tools used for aquatic creatures are useless on him. 8, any encounter with Leviathan would be absolutely pointless. 9, mere sight of him will defeat the challenger. Ortlund notes these rhetorical questions intend not to humiliate Job, but to highlight the active power of God, who both can and does accomplish victories impossible for Job. Verse 10, who could stand against God? Remember, he just went through all this stuff for the first time and says, who can stand before me? We're not merely just talking about his power. Who could confront God in such a manner that he would make restitution? Based on verse 11. Just as these creatures are not approachable by man or beast, how much more of Yahweh? God describes these creatures as ones that he created, which matches that of the sea dragon in Genesis 1, day 5. Interestingly enough, though, if we look at some Jewish texts during the Second Temple period, 1 Enoch, for instance, in chapter 67 through 8, on that day were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the water, but the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Dewey Diant. That's not how you pronounce that at all, but it's okay. On the east of the garden where the elect and the righteous dwell, where my grandfather was taken up, the seventh from Adam, the first man, whom the Lord of Spirits created. In reference to day 5, let's go to 2nd Esdras, chapter 6, 47 through 52. On the 5th day, so it's looking back on the creation, so it's looking at the 5th day, you commanded the 7th part where the water had been gathered together to bring forth living creatures, bird, and fishes, and so it was done. The dumb and lifeless water produced living creatures as it was commanded, so that therefore the nations might declare your wondrous works. Then you kept in existence 2 living creatures, the one you called Behemoth and the name of the other Leviathan. And you separated one from the other, for the 7th part where the water had been gathered together could not hold them both. And you gave Behemoth one of the parts that had been dried up on the 3rd day to live in it, where there are 1,000 mountains. But to Leviathan you gave the 7th part, the watery part, and you have kept them to be eaten by whom you wish, and when you wish. They distinguish these two from everything else, and they're made on day 5 according to Jewish thinking, meaning they're seeing these 2 creatures as something totally different than just mere creatures. If God is the creator and conqueror of these beasts and does so easily, the very ones that we could not stand against, then how can one think they can stand against God and question his judgment? God implies to Job that Job did not know what he was asking for when he called for the chaos monster to be stirred up, but God makes this claim in relation to himself, not Leviathan alone. This surely must have been a sobering reproof to Job, the arguer from chapters 3 through 31, but is probably very hopeful as well. Verse 11, God also claims Leviathan as his own, that no one else can take down. God does not delegate the task of fighting the chaos monster to anyone else. This is his enemy, who is no equal to him, but we have no ability to take him on. What's interesting is Ortlund notes is Leviathan's attacks are mimicry of what's known as divine combat or theophanic combat. The only difference is that in Job 41, it is Leviathan who does these things, not God. But that is not surprising, for in other texts of this kind, the chaos God defeats mimics the kind of attacks he makes on it. The point of Leviathan's mimicry of the divine warfare in Job 41, 18 to 21 is to make inescapably clear that Job cannot even approach a monster with such an arsenal at his disposal, much less oppose it. But doing so is an easy matter for God. Yahweh is effectively revealing to Job that he does not understand what he desires. The very creature that he said, yo, you sorcerers, call forth and eat and basically remove my conception. God is making a point saying, you have no idea what you're asking for. You're asking for a chaos creature that you have no ability to fight and no human being has the ability to fight, not even as an army. Only I can do this, and you're questioning my judgment. You think you know what's right for this world? You think you know what's right for you? You're calling forth for something that you have no ability to control. You have no idea how outside of your depth you are. Job thought he had experienced the worst of life had to offer, and that his sufferings had shown him the truth about God and God's world, which Job's blessed past hid from him. Job was, of course, aware of Leviathan in some distant fashion, but misunderstood what relationship this chaos had to his own predicament. We as the reader also come to realize that not all suffering is due to God's judgment, nor an outcome of our sin. We know that neither were the case from the opening chapters. This second speech also rebukes both parties for assuming it is only one or the other. However, it does entail that God allows suffering and chaos in this world. He has done so since the very beginning. It is part of our world. The point is not just that God could hypothetically adorn himself with radiant majesty in order to bring the sword near to Behemoth and lay hands on Leviathan in battle, but he does go to battle against these powers, subduing and defeating monsters Job could not even touch. Many of the wisdom texts look at it as these creatures do so by attacking God's people in his creation, which means God fights them on our behalf. It is important to note that these two speeches are not merely there to chastise, rebuke, and shame Job, but to bring Job to understand how little he knows about what God does and therefore provide comfort in this understanding. God is correcting Job, but he's doing so to bring comfort in the midst of this chaos and to bring clarity that he is the one who can and will destroy suffering and chaos. The idea that these are just talking about dinosaurs, I know I've harped on that so much, extreme disservice to the entire purpose of the speech. People want to argue it still, they can, but to do so and ignore the entire point of why they're there, the first 14 verses tell you why they're there. And then the ending of Leviathan tells you why they're there. This whole argument over, is this a hippo? Is this a crocodile? Is this a dinosaur? Is like Genesis 1 all over again. It completely spits in the face of everything that's happening apart from the words that people are more focused on. And I'm guilty of that. And when I came to realization of that, I was like, holy smokes, how awesome is God and how little do I know his word. Because just like with Genesis 1, we saw there was a whole lot of weird stuff that happened there. And we even do the whole chapter. There's a whole lot of weird stuff happening here. And it's not just to say, hey, look at these cool creatures that are everyday creatures or extinct creatures. That one statement, who then is he who can stand before me? We already know God's powerful from the first speech. So we're not talking about his power over creation, because if we're talking about dinosaurs, then that's effectively what we're talking about, is power over creation. We're talking about power in regards to justice and judgment. Who are we to question his judgment when we have no idea what's happening? Job has no idea about the rules of engagement that were set beforehand between God and the Satan, and he's asking for the chaos monster to consume him. God's like, what are you talking about? That is the dumbest decision you could ever ask. That's the dumbest thing you could ever ask for. Worst decision you could make. Why would you question my ability to provide justice? You already knew you didn't do anything wrong, so why'd you question me? But the beautiful thing too is Job never left God. Even in his anger, he stuck by God, which God was like, see, I know my people. He's ticked. He's mad at me. He doesn't understand though. He doesn't understand what's going on. Neither do we, ever. But God's like, in the face of chaos and suffering, you have no idea what I'm doing. Don't jump to that conclusion that I've left you just because life sucks right now. I'm still here, and I'm doing more than you realize. Holding back so much more than you realize. And then he blesses Job, but that is the ending of Job, is that whole speech in the question of God's relationship to suffering. How little do we know?